While we've both watched the USA men and women take gold in this year's Olympics, over here on H2DG, it's time to get back to our exclusive segment, You Had to Be There. When the NBA season ends and there's little NBA to talk about, this is the perfect time to throw it back and give flowers to our NBA favorites of the past. Whether they are widely considered all-time greats, hidden gems, none of that matters here. There are legends, yes, but there are also legends in our hearts, and this segment makes room for both. And I believe that we all have that one player we reminisce over and say, man, you just had to be there. You had to be present to watch them on a nightly basis to fully grasp and appreciate their skill and talent. And in today's edition, I am excited to be joined by 19 Media Group teammate, if I'm correct, Celtics fan. Am I right on that?
You are absolutely right on that. Yeah.
Fellow lyricist, as I've heard as well, co-host of the Baseline NBA podcast, finally making his H2DG debut, is none other than Cal Lee, as he takes us on a time travel journey to learn more about and give flowers to a player that he enjoyed watching. And by the end of this episode, we hope to get the overall point across that you just had to be there to witness the way they impacted the game. Cal Lee, welcome to H2DG.
Hey, man. Appreciate you actually having me on board, Des. I know it's been a minute, but I am humbly honored to have an opportunity to be on your show and most definitely chop it up about which I think is an awesome segment. It's interesting after watching the the 2024 Olympics and seeing how that team came together
Mm.
and really showed people where we are now in the world of the NBA in comparison to how it is being looked at globally. Kind of, you can't help but start thinking back to what started it for you. Like, who did you see? Who did you
Mm.
first watch? Who did if you were out there, on the playground, on the ball court, wherever, whether you're from New York, Los Angeles, or out in the mean streets of Serbia, Croatia, like, who was it that you were following? Who were you aspiring to if you wanted to play basketball? Tailor your game around. And I just think that this was a great chance for people who probably didn't realize and understand just how successful the men's and women's basketball teams, not just for the USA but globally, how they were able to put that on display, man. I think it just lends itself to why your segment is so important, because in the aftermath of all this, you really should be thinking back, like, what started it all for you? Like, whose games do you wish that you were seeing on that basketball court if they didn't have an opportunity to play for their national teams, what they could have possibly been able to do on the world stage, not just the stage that we typically see on TV or on our streaming devices.
Yeah, that's a great point that you bring up, Cal, especially when you think about, like, I think it was Kevin Durant who said, like, we don't get paid for this. Like, we do this because we want to do this. And
Mhm.
and you see that some of those guys, they take pride in watching the previous teams. And, like, to your point, it's like we want to put on the way they put on, and then it's like a constant, chain reaction. So you're right. That's certainly something that emerges with some of those, especially some of those younger guys like Anthony Edwards and who really stepped up and made it a point to say, like, hey, I watched KD growing up and I want to do the same thing he did. So you're right about that. And especially it being summertime and things of that nature where you can chill out a little bit. I think your mind kind of goes in that direction in general. So that's a great point that you make. Welcome to Hip to the Games, the podcast for you, the basketball junkie and the hip hop head. I'm your host, Desmond, and I too have had hoop dreams and enjoy the beautiful genre of hip hop and its history. Together, we will enjoy some of the greatest albums, songs, artists, players, moments, teams, and so much more, while even mixing the two on occasion, all in my hope that you remember why you love both or either of these to begin with. You'll soon understand that Hip to the Games is more than just a podcast. It's a lifestyle. And if you were looking for a platform that combines both basketball and hip hop, you've come to the right place. But as I'm excited to finally have you on the episode of Hip to the Games, Kyle, if it hasn't hit our listener here already, you've always struck me as a passionate basketball fan, and I'm happy and grateful you get the chance to bring that fandom to HDG, HDTG.
Yeah, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. Definitely.
For sure. So, wasting no time, Kyle Lee. You've had plenty of time to think about it now, and I think it's time you reveal who is a player that you look back on and say, "Man, you just had to be there."
I mean, there's so many. There's so many
Naturally.
players, right? Naturally, like I've been fortunate enough, and so I'm certainly not going to try to reveal my age, but I've been fortunate enough to be able to watch, a lot of basketball, through my years, and I've been fortunate enough, through what we do, to have the opportunity to sit down and speak with players, and really like, get insight on how they what inspired them to play the game of basketball, what drove them to play the game of basketball.
Mhm.
And then there's those, those moments where you say to yourself, man, it's a shame that they didn't get an opportunity to really, play on a bigger platform, because I really think people can then truly appreciate what they could bring to the table. Um, I'm gonna go off the grid a little bit, because I tend to get very fandom friendly, right? Like I'll easily say, oh, you had to be there when Kevin Garnett was balling. You know what I mean? Like I have that tendency to do that, because I just don't think in this modern generation, with the exception of what we have access to, and that a lot of these guys are now personalities that you hear kind of, speaking their truth and their stories about what it was like being in the NBA. And I think that's where there's a gateway for people to really appreciate them. But I don't know if they've taken the actual time to see them go out in a basketball court and play, or capture true footage of what they showed you that they were capable of doing.
Mhm.
There's one person that I really think doesn't get enough respect, because I think he really revolutionized the way athletes have to prepare themselves to compete on a night in, night out basis, especially from the shooting guard position.
Mhm.
And the only reason why I say that is the name sounds familiar, because he has a cool nickname, even though his body frame and demeanor does not resemble what his nickname reflects. But if you know who I'm talking about, there's a scrawny little kid out of the University of Connecticut who, I don't like the University of Connecticut, because they at the time were Big East. And if you are Big East basketball down, you either Syracuse, you Georgetown like me. I'm a Bulldog, I'm a Hoya, you know what I mean?
Okay.
You have
Okay.
Seton Hall. You remember those days when the Big East was the Big East, right? Like the NBA was Big East heavy. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Before there was Big E, there was the Big East. You know what I'm saying? But out of the University of Connecticut, this dude named Richard Hamilton,
Mm,
Richard Rip Hamilton.
mm,
I knew, first of all, he was part of the foundation that helped build that empire by Calhoun and his program, right? He was a part of that. Like, I know a lot of people gravitate towards Ray Allen, but after Ray Allen, there was Rip. And when Rip was out there, he defied a lot of what the metrics would say you needed to be as a quality guard. Then when he gets to the NBA, you could clearly see that he recognized very quickly, for him to be a established guard in the league, it
mhm.
wasn't that he had to be shooting the highest, because at the time when he came out, the three-point shot still was kind of an anomaly, right? We didn't
Right.
have people lighting it up like, really most of the and it was basically the Milwaukee Bucks. Whoever played shooting guard for Milwaukee Bucks was the one shooting threes. Michael Redd, Ray Allen, you know what I'm
Mm.
saying?
Yeah.
Glenn Robinson thought he could play the two. You know what I'm saying? Big dog Glenn Robinson. But when it came to and anyone from the Indiana Pacers, but when it came to the ability to play the two guard position, we started seeing the evolution of the motion offense, and it was evident that for you to get that ball, you had to show the dexterity, and you had to show the stamina to be able to move in certain spaces and be able to find your spots. And still, then the mid range was obviously very prevalent. And I could not. find a better person who revolutionized what you're currently seeing in this NBA. The movement and the ability to get to those spots, I honestly feel like was revolutionized by what Rip Hamilton did. Now, I don't want people to get what I'm saying get twisted. Okay. I am not saying Rip Hamilton is the greatest two guard. I'm not saying that Rip Hamilton, revolutionized the sport in that aspect. What I'm saying is the preparation that Rip Hamilton put in and the way that he, kind of situated his game helped really put things in perspective for coaches and even the trainers, physical trainers, to put in place what was necessary for what you wanted to see in a motion offense from your two guard.
Mhm.
Because a lot of it in most cases was predicated on, you know, a dynamic point guard or some, big body type, front court players who can basically slow everybody down because you just run them over. And then therefore your two guard gets open and he can just shoot his shot. Rip Hamilton, with the teams that he played with until he played with the Detroit Pistons, which I think then really kind of revolutionized the importance of having a Rasheed Wallace and Rasheed the Wallaces, the Ben Wallaces and the Rasheed Wallaces. He was the kind of person that made what they do that much more important because of how long he would do it, 4 quarters full, right? Like I think there
Very
was a
true.
time before analytics they were trying to measure like how much running was Rip Hamilton doing in the course of an
He
NBA
was
game. He would
definitely one of the ones that made the NBA say we're gonna start keeping track of players' miles because
right. I listen. I would not have been surprised if the USA men's track team actually tried reaching out to Rip Hamilton and asked him to run the 1500 or the longer distances just by the way that he was, putting in that work on the basketball court to get himself open and the amount of running that he did. Now you look at it, it's like look at Steph Curry. Perfect example. You know what I'm saying? Of a guy who is who believed in his conditioning was so important because it wasn't just about him and him having the basketball in hand and the ISO dribble and creating shot. It was utilizing the space of the basketball court and his teammates in a way, and it would require him to have to be able to run these distances from east, west, north, south to get himself open in his spots. I don't think we would have been able to really appreciate seeing that if we didn't see a guy like Rip Hamilton on the court doing it. And I'm not saying he is just the first. I'm just saying he's the one that kind of set the tone for what the modern NBA now implements for the motion offense because you need players like what Rip Hamilton was doing to kind of set that in motion, make it a realistic thing. And then all of a sudden you see guys like the Anthony Edwards and the Kobe Bryants and all those following that they had to condition themselves if they wanted to get the ball in different ways, open up offenses in different ways, give head coaches opportunities in different ways. You had to see these players go out and do that. And I think Rep Hamilton was among one of those dudes to kind of really set the standard in that.
Most definitely, most definitely. And a few things popped in my head while you were saying that. So, one thing I think you make the comparison to Steph Curry, right? Like, multiple. I think two guys who were in similar situations as far as like, hey, when Steph came into the league, everybody was doubting his size. Everybody's saying, oh, he's not your prototypical NBA point guard. We don't know how long he's gonna last. I think the same thing with Rip Hamilton. It's like a
Yep.
lot of power guards, right? Vince
Mm-hmm.
Carter, Kobe, a lot of bigger guys. How it makes you wonder how can a skinny guy like him, find his footing when everybody else is jumping and dunking and post move, post fade. Everybody's trying to be Jordan, but he kind of did it in his own way.
Mm-hmm.
And even for me, like I always tell the story of how, like when I finally played organized basketball in sixth grade, it was like I was just figuring out how to play like structured ball, like how to use screens and things of that nature. I'm learning all that for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And even off instincts alone, it was just like, okay, I may not understand everything, but you know what? Rip Hamilton was a lot like me. Skinny guy, not the most athletic. Uh that's pretty much what he had, like his quickness. So I was like, okay, well, I had the simple math of just being like, well, if there's open space, do like Rip Hamilton, run around that corner like a
Mhm.
floppy and get on the other side and get open. And that was like one of the first players that I really truly pattern my game after, was because he was gonna get to the open spot. So I think it's dope that you bring him up for one, and that this episode is gonna give him his flowers. And I think too, even in this league now, where I think we're kind of at that stage where I feel like a lot of coaches, a lot of teams are like, okay, like obviously a lot of us have a go-to guy that we can get the ball to, but at the same time, we know we don't want to do ISO ball for 48 minutes. We need guys to move off the ball. So I understand what you're saying as well, that we're kind of starting to see a little bit more of that emphasis in this game. Like I think it's gonna get cool again to move off the ball, because number one, people are gonna see Steph Curry get his buckets off it, like, hey, like this dude doesn't stop moving and he's impossible to guard. I want to be impossible to guard. So maybe I should
Right.
do the same things. I think so. I think to your point, we're definitely seeing that in today's game.
Yeah, look, he so and when I bring this guy up, right, I really appreciate the fact that you highlighted he's six he was 6'6", 185 pounds. Okay. I can't even remember the last time I was around 185 pounds. All right. Like like if that happens, I think people think that I'm like there's a problem with me. I'm anorexic or something. And he's actually taller than me. So like let's put that into context. I'm six
Right.
one. He's 6'6", 185 pounds on a good day, right? And in his best years, right? So who knows where that was? And for an 82 game season, along with playoffs, he basically is on that basketball court, running up and down for 4 quarters, right? Um, and to your point, at any given time, remember too, this isn't just run around in circles and get open. He is taking contact. He is trying to free
Very
himself
true.
up from larger guards and swing guys, which at the time we didn't call them swing, but swing guys who play the two but has the body of a three, guys who played the four but has the body of a three. He's playing against
Michael Finley.
significantly larger. Yeah, he's playing against significantly longer, taller, or bigger players, and he has to fight through and get open for his team. And just another thing to put in context, like he played 13 seasons in the NBA. Only 2 of those seasons did he score less than 10 points per game, but he averaged 17 for his career. Okay, and during the years in which they won, he was basically averaging anywhere between 19, 20 points per game, next to Big Shot, Chauncey, and the Rasheed Wallace, right? Which you can make the argument between those two, and also Tayshaun Prince, between those two. Obviously, he was such an important piece to those
Mhm.
two championships that he won. Also, as well, too, he was a defensive player of the year. You know, this guy defied a lot of the odds. And to your point, he didn't reflect what the prototype of what the NBA player should look like, because everybody wanted to look like Michael Jordan. Everybody wanted to look like Kobe Bryant. Everybody wanted to look like, you know what I'm saying, or grow as tall, as Anthony Hardaway. But there was
Right.
only so many guys who could play the position the way that he played it. You had Allen Iverson, right? He was a part of that era as well too. But there were so many guys that could have the skill set to play basketball, but with his body be able to do so much against so much bigger competition. And I just found that to be remarkable. And again, he was a focal point. He wasn't somebody that was coming off the bench. He wasn't, somebody that was, you know, just kind of being thrown in there. You know what I'm saying? Like he legitimately came in and was averaging anywhere from 34, 35 minutes doing the things that he was doing in that era of physicality and things of that nature. I just find that pretty remarkable.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Cal, let's backtrack just a little bit. I always need the origin story, man. Where were you in life when you first heard Richard Hamilton? Was it kind of in college when you were saying, or was it Coatesville? You know what I'm saying? Where were you when you first got wind of him?
Oh, I was in Florida,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting here, watching college basketball, because at that time I still believed in the way college basketball was, it wasn't influenced by what we're seeing now, where teams just bouncing all over the different conferences, and really a lot of that has been affected by college football.
Right.
So college basketball was never really impacted by it until they really started putting emphasis on allowing programs to just bounce all over the place because conferences are willing to pay top dollar. I really wish that this didn't impact college basketball, because what I saw from Rip Hamilton, to me, was proof that he had the ability to make it in the NBA, because the standard was, Big East basketball was considered one of the toughest conferences next to the ACC, right? So watching him competitively go against, what I'm saying, the Carmelo Anthony's, and going against, the Jeff Greens, and the Dikembe Mutombos, of college basketball on a nightly basis, he had to prove his worth, right? He had to prove, especially for the University of Connecticut, he had to prove that he was a part of the pillar of that program. So when I watched him, I loathed watching him, because I know that dude was gonna ball out. He ain't playing the University of Connecticut to, what I'm saying, just for oohs and ahs. Like, the kid legitimately could ball. So when
Hmm.
I was watching him, man, like he was carving up my Georgetown Hoyas. And I was just like, dude, like, as much as I hate seeing him, he's gonna make it in the NBA. I
Mm.
thought maybe like somebody would say, "Oh no, he's too skinny," which of course that's what the sentiment was. Like, he'd be too skinny for him to be able to handle, the physicality of what the NBA offers and stuff like that. And I'm like, what? You don't remember what Allen Iverson has been doing for the last umpteen years? Come on, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, that kid was doing that 6 years earlier before Rip Hamilton comes onto the scene, right? Or I'm sorry, 4 years earlier before Rip Hamilton comes onto the scene. Let's not get it twisted. The difference is that Rip Hamilton was playing in a program where he is around other successful players. They just didn't think that that success could easily translate, because he didn't have like that growth spurt that some of those guys coming out of college would have. But fortunately, playing under Calhoun, and more importantly, fortunately, just playing in the Big East program, I really think prepared him on what he needed to do if he wanted to maintain being in the NBA. Oh, by the way, averaging around 45%, shooting field goal percentage. And what I'm saying? That's not pretty bad. He was not a great 3-point shooter. It wasn't until like maybe the latter part of his years he actually started emphasizing shooting the three ball more. But he's
Yeah.
not a great 3-point shooter. But be damned if he was not a legit mid range guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, homie just, and he was a great free throw shooter as well too, high 80%. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's the kind of guy that when he gets inside the paint and he finds his spot, if he's getting his shot, it's likely to go in, or he's going to get fouled and he's going on the free throw line. He didn't rebound the basketball all that great. Wasn't so obviously he was not there to distribute the basketball.
Hmm.
You damn sure wasn't going to worry about whether or not he's going to get rebounds. But he was a hustler, and he was scrappy, and he was a great defender. And he was a legit guy that got you those 2 points. If he gets open, the priority was to get him the ball, because he will find a way to find his spot to get to take his shot. So and I saw that all the time in UConn. I know it's hard for people to understand that, but it's like, if you watch it, there was a time where watching cats in college basketball, you could easily see what that would translate to in the NBA. Where it got really real kind of foggy is when dudes were doing, like, I forget what the Morrison kid. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Oh yeah.
he's just completely like scorching teams. And they're like, "Oh, it's got to translate into the NBA." But he didn't play against anybody, right? He was fortunate to play in a conference which, his of course, for him, he was so dominant, and his team, what I'm saying, just basically had a red carpet rollout to get into the NCAA tournament. And in the NCAA tournament, anything can happen. But in the NBA, how does that translate? Jimmer Fredette, right? Like,
Mm.
so there are guys out there who do so many amazing things, break so many records in college basketball. But you look at the landscape of when they played, who they played against, and what they did to accomplish those numbers. And you could probably tell for a good number of them, yeah, they're probably not going to last too long in the NBA. But I don't think you ever saw that with Rip Hamilton when he was in UConn.
I was gonna ask that too. Like, was he like that prospect where you knew that the way they played in college, That is definitely something you can bring to the NBA. Like, I felt like it was kind of similar with Devin Booker, because if I'm correct,
Hmm.
he came off the bench in Kentucky. I might be thinking of someone else too, but um I know that, he obviously he wasn't the Devin Booker we see today in Kentucky, but scouts and people higher ups in the NBA kind of figured like, hey, like he's going to be a lottery pick for a reason. Like, sure, depending on who that team is, like I know there was conversations he could have even been a part of OKC with KD and Russ, so that would have been even crazy too. But for him to land in Phoenix where he could eventually develop, I think even by his second year, he was over 20 points a game. So it was like he didn't always show that in college, but you knew the potential was there. Was that the same thing kind of with Richard Hamilton?
Yeah, I think so. But if you were following college basketball, he finished second on UConn's all-time scoring list. Okay, so basically, you knew in that program that somewhere in this landscape of the NBA, because again, the Big East was the big pipeline for a lot of NBA players. Okay. If you succeeded in UConn, you succeeded in Georgetown, you succeeded in Syracuse, you succeeded in Providence, you succeeded in Villanova, you succeeded in Seton Hall, you're probably going to be playing in the NBA. And it doesn't matter if you were starting or if you were coming off the bench, right? Like it just felt like the gravitas was whoever's coming, and then everywhere else is, SEC. How many during that time frame? How many players in the SEC really, you know what I'm saying? Had caught your attention. Ben Wallace wasn't in a major SEC program playing in basketball. He was undrafted. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Antonio McDyess, who I used to love. Love. He was going to be my person I was going to have this conversation with you on
Ooh, that
about,
would have
you
been
know
a
what I'm
good
saying? You
one
had to
too.
be there because I love me some Antonio McDyess. SEC dude, you probably don't get to see him much if you're living up north, but I was living down in Florida at the time. And I saw his games and he was, that kid was the truth. He, to me, was the closest representation of Larry Johnson after Larry Johnson made it to the NBA.
Mm.
Like his injuries is what impacted that. But that could be another, you bring me back on, hopefully. Hopefully I do right by you on this episode. But you bring me back on and we can have an Antonio McDyess conversation. But I used to love watching Antonio McDyess. But even Antonio McDyess, I didn't think had it as easy, so to speak, as Rip Hamilton, because Rip Hamilton had it established. He's playing for Coach Calhoun. You know what I'm saying? He's playing for a prestigious Big East program, and he winds up being Big East Player of the Year, winning national championships, and ultimately winning second and scoring second all time. You know what I'm saying? Like next to Ray Allen and Chris Smith. He's in that kind of conversation. There's going to be a path for him in the NBA. I don't think anybody really questioned it. I think what they question is his sustainability and his longevity in the NBA because of his frame. But he quickly proved that the intangibles that he brings to the table are not going to be marginalized because he doesn't have the body type just yet. And listen, even in his best days, he probably came into the NBA like 165, 180 pounds, and probably wound up only gaining 5 more pounds and still wound up being in the NBA for 13 years. But
Yeah.
again, I just speak more to the fact that he came in to that UConn program already with the presence that he was going to be a significant contributor for UConn. I just think maybe people didn't realize how big a contributor he was, right? Like how great he really is. And I think now people are starting to recognize. I think the people in UConn recognize that they've retired his jersey. So he's only the second person to have his jersey retired. But
Really?
yeah, he
Mm.
he to me reflects a lot of what like people I think want to now find and hold and grab back on your yesterdays and say, damn, what I'm seeing currently right now, was there anybody doing a little bit of what that was going on? And here I go and I associate a guy like Richard Hamilton as being one of those cornerstone guys who showed us, that he can utilize his frame. And let's also be realistic as well too. Rip Hamilton was someone he played basketball, right? Like he averaged quite a number of games. There was only one season, I think or 2 seasons rather. Injuries really marginalized his ability to play, but he played over 783 games. You know what I'm saying? Like, or I'm sorry, he
Generally around,
started over 783 games, but
yeah,
he
generally
played the
around, I think
majority of his
75,
games.
82.
Yeah,
He
like
was out there.
yeah, he was out there, man. Like, and that's, again, to do what he was doing for how as long as he was doing it, pretty remarkable stuff. I give him his flowers, loathingly, but but it's well deserved because and there's one other thing too as well. I'm not sure if whether or not you heard our episode um, of the Baseline, co-hosted by my man Warren Shaw and myself. But we did an episode of They Reminisce Over You. We love doing this episode, or this segment actually, because it really helps us kind of go back and think. Sometimes we get so caught up in what the current NBA is that we don't hit the rewind button back and say, like, how long have I been following this sport? Like, how long have I been watching cats, ball,
Right.
and things of that nature. We did an episode of um, They Reminisce, and we talked about Steve Francis.
Hmm.
And I, it was interesting because after we had dropped that episode, we got a lot of good feedback, right? Like people say, yeah, I remember when Steve Francis and da da da. We put the caveat in there in the context. I said, I don't want people to make it seem like we're saying that Steve Francis was this great, great NBA player. Because a lot of what impacted him was more off the court and his approach and mentality of the game.
Hmm.
I was like, but when he was right, when he was mentally on, he literally was like an unstoppable force. It's just that we didn't get enough of it for us to appreciate it, right? And he
Hmm.
was playing in a time where everything was basically being handed to him. The keys were being handed to him. They just go and do your thing. And I don't think he really appreciated what was really being asked of him or what he needed to do in order to put himself in a better space on having that legacy conversation that I think a lot of people would have wanted. I think that's what hurt. I think that's where people are very disappointed with what happened with regards to him. So I just find it interesting because one, I got a message from a really good uh, person who basically said, he's like, I just think he's overrated. He's like, don't take it as disrespect. I'm like, it's not disrespectful. You have every right to feel that way. And I
Hmm.
think in many, many respects, a lot of people feel the way that you feel, that he was overrated. I was like, but what I'm just emphasizing, and I think what Warren and I were emphasizing when we were having this conversation was forget everything that we understand has happened to him and just look at what he actually did, right?
Right.
Like, just strip that. It's hard to do that because in the context of basketball, in the game of basketball, it is a team sport. But I was like, just look at what he did for his size and when he was on, what happened to it? Like when he was dunking on people, when he was, what I'm saying? See, we didn't have the luxury of worrying about that with Rip Hamilton because Rip Hamilton was a model of consistency. Rip Hamilton was a model of winning. Rip Hamilton was about team. That is the reason why the Detroit Pistons have 2 championships. I understand that everybody, is looking at that team holistically, but that team fit doesn't happen unless you got a guy like Rip Hamilton buying in. And because he is so used to being successful, even before, remember, he used to play for the Washington Bullets, then becomes the Washington Wizards, for Christ's sake. So he is not like, what I'm saying, he understood what winning was like in the NBA. He didn't understand what that truly meant until he played for the Detroit Pistons. And he was one of the foundations for a run where in that 5-6 year stretch, the Detroit Pistons were the model of the Eastern Conference, winning 2 championships,
Facts.
continually getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. He basically made Joe Dumars what I'm saying, the mastermind. You know what I'm saying? Joe Dumars was like the Victor Von Doom, you know what I'm saying, of the Eastern Conference executives. You know what I mean? Like, his what he put together was the what do you call it? The kryptonite to the formulas that we were used to seeing in the NBA at that time. Remember, the Detroit Pistons collapsed the perception that you needed. You had to have a Shaq, Kobe super team. You know what I'm saying? Remember when they had the Los Angeles Lakers 1-12, full of Hall of Famer All Stars, and the Detroit Pistons went through them like, you know what I'm saying, knife through hot butter. You know what I mean? Like, yo, the Detroit Pistons showed you what team basketball looked like, and it
Mhm.
shook the Los Angeles Lakers to the degree that Shaq is gone. Kobe Bryant is like, I can't play with you no more. You know what I'm saying? Like, they shook the Los Angeles Lakers, bro. They shook that empire. You know what I'm saying? They're responsible for that, and that's Rip Hamilton was a reason why that was the case, right? So
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's crazy. Now you look at the way that teams are being built and structured. You know what I'm saying? They see what the blueprint is. They see what the formula is.
Yeah. It's getting cool again to have those more team-based cores, if you will. Yeah, that's facts. That's facts. I think too, like you mentioned, I mean, I think it was what from '03 to '08, like
Mhm.
the Pistons were definitely like semifinals, right? And probably Eastern Conference Finals threats. Like
Mhm.
and it's funny that like you think okay, they made it they made it in '03, right? And then they won in '04. And it's funny to look back and see how close they got other times, right? And even like '08, right?
Remember, they could have had 3 championships, but they ran into a buzzsaw with the San Antonio Spurs.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, they just didn't have an answer for a then game Tim Duncan. You know what I'm saying? And Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker. You know, they just didn't have it. So
Another team-based system, right?
mhm. Look, Popovich ain't stupid. You know,
Right.
Popovich ain't stupid. And let's also remember. Let's also remember too. Um, the Detroit Pistons birthed, right? They were responsible for the evolution of LeBron James. People don't remember. Remember that playoff series where LeBron James literally put the Cleveland Cavaliers on his back, put the city of Cleveland on his back, put the ghosts of the Cavaliers on his back, put Brad Daugherty, Craig Elo, and Mark Price all on his back. And he literally was a one-man wrecking crew against the Detroit Pistons. I mean,
Mhm.
basically, he reflected a lot of how you can break the Detroit Pistons. You ultimately are just going to need people that are just athletically bigger, faster, stronger, and hungrier than what the Pistons reflected or represented. You know what I'm saying? Um, because they were a wall. They
Yeah.
literally were a wall during that time in the NBA. And I can respectfully say that because that's what you had to be. You know what I'm saying? That's what you literally had to be. If you wanted to get to the NBA finals, you had to beat five. You couldn't beat one or two. You couldn't just and the Detroit Pistons, especially with Rip Hamilton, were the kind of team where they minimize as much of them beating themselves as much as you would have to beat them. And it literally, to me, helped birth the evolution of a LeBron James, making his presence to the world that he literally is the king. Like he was the king because of the fandom and the hoopla, and he's coming from high school, and he's gonna be, the future of the Cleveland Cavaliers and everything like that. But his presence being known to the rest of the NBA, his claim to fame, like Michael Jordan against the Boston Celtics, you know what I'm saying? Like that kind of
Mhm.
mode,
Mhm.
you saw that when LeBron James had to play against the Detroit Pistons. And I think that was what,
7.
2007? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I think even to that point too, because right, the year after that they face Boston, and then that's after that is when they kind of say, you know what, let's get AI up in here. Yeah, Ben Wallace will let you go free agency. Like just change the whole kind of thing they had
and you
going
notice it
on.
just never was the same.
Yeah.
It just never was the same. And you could clearly tell that, you know, Rip, I don't want like Rip, Chauncey Billups, Wallace, the Wallaces, um, they just didn't feel like or they it just never felt the same. They had a brotherhood. And
Mhm.
I don't know, it would be awesome one day to maybe have all of them sit there and in a round table. I hope that they do something like that. They film something like that where they have a round table conversation. I'd really be interested to find out how much it meant for them to play with each other. I'm sure that there's probably something out there. Um,
For
but
sure.
to me, it would be great if it's something that's made available for everyone to have access to. But I would really be interested to find out, what that felt like. Prince, the Wallaces, Billups, and Hamilton. what that meant during that era of them playing. Um, you know, because to me, I just really think people really didn't appreciate how good a team they were, man. They were the consummate team. That they reflected team basketball at a time that I think people were way too enamored with, superstar team ups, and having, the big 1-2 punch. Um, you know, I just think that they showed you that they could be stars amongst themselves. Like they didn't have to come in. And the other thing as well too, and I don't want to be too long winded about this.
As a fan of Hip to the Games, not only should you show your love for the podcast, but you gotta express your love for basketball and hip hop. With a wide variety of clothing and accessories, there is always a way to show how much the game of basketball and the game of rap means to you. Let everybody know what it means to be hip to the games by clicking the link in the episode's description to cop some merch and represent the H2DG lifestyle.
But the other thing about this too that I really appreciate about Rip Hamilton, I want people to understand is Rip Hamilton didn't come into the NBA as the next coming.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't come into the NBA. He came into the NBA as a byproduct of what was supposed to be the way most kids go to get to the NBA. Like you pay your dues in college basketball, you get drafted by the NBA, and if you're a high pick, you're ready to play against the big boys, right? All of these guys came in, and they had to earn that respect. They basically had to they had to basically stamp their name in that conversation. And I think that's why
That's a
it's
good
taken so
point.
long for people to really appreciate how good they were. You know what I'm saying? Because
That's
I
a
don't
good
think
point.
people really understand, like, they didn't come out with they didn't have star power on their roster. All of these guys, with the exception of Rasheed Wallace, who I think a lot of people remember, Rasheed Wallace coming fresh from Portland, right? And everything like that. Rasheed Wallace is, it's like people are like, man, I don't know about this problem child. Like, can he stay
Right.
on the basketball court? Look
Probably
what
got a
it took
tech
to
on the
get.
airplane,
Yeah, exactly. Look what it took for him to buy in, right? Like it took the right combination. It took the right core of guys for him to truly buy in. And listen, while people talk about this whole Draymond Green thing, hey, I want you to look at what happened with Rasheed Wallace, right? Before there was Draymond, there was Rasheed Wallace. Not because of the text, but because of the emphasis of what Rasheed Wallace was as a person and what he was demanding of and expecting for the teams that he played for. He wanted that in kind. He just didn't want to be playing with dudes that are just, you know what I'm saying, playing for the name on the back of their jersey. Like
Mm.
he wanted to be around a team that goes out and knows how to succeed and win games. Remember, he came from the University of North Carolina. He came from that kind of program. So I think a lot of guys, you know what I'm saying, like real again, I just want people to, you look at that roster, go up and down that roster, look it up and tell me on that roster you saw dudes out there that were already, you know what I'm saying, making gazillion dollars, you know what I'm saying, getting Nike commercials. And it wasn't like that for some of these cats. A lot of them, people thought that them getting moved to Detroit was being moved to purgatory, NBA purgatory. And these guys figured out a way to come together and win 2 NBA championships. Remarkable stuff.
Man, that's facts. Because when you think about Chauncey, like how hard it was for him just getting bounced around from team to team till he
He was with my
finally,
Celtics. He
yeah.
was, and I didn't have a problem with them moving on from him. No, sorry, Chauncey. You know what I'm saying? Love Chauncey, man. Love him to death, right? Love him to death. But it just wasn't working out for what I wanted from my Boston Celtics. And that's okay because now he became a better version. I think sometimes people get lost in, like, there's some dudes, you come into a program or you come to a situation and it's all good, you know what I'm saying? Because you have all these high hopes. But if they're not living up to the billing of what your expectations are, if they're not producing in the kind of way that is indicative or is reflective of what they are asking of you, I would never say, oh, that guy's going to be trash. He'll never make it in the NBA. I'm hoping that he finds another place, another team that where his skill set really, really, is looked at and sought after. It yields success, not just for him, but for whoever the team is taking that chance on him. So when they moved on from Chauncey Billups, like I was wishing death upon his career because he didn't produce for my Celtics. I just didn't want that nonsense coming back to bite the Celtics behind.
Right, right.
That's all. I'm saying, sorry for being a little selfish about that. But I'm so happy that Chauncey Billups found his footing and he proved more than anything that he's a great leader, right?
Yeah.
Like to be able to be that kind of point guard and to be as clutch as he was. Because remember, when the shot really needed to go down, he wasn't afraid to take that shot. And he was in a place in Detroit where everybody was confident that if Rip wasn't open, oh, big, you know what I'm saying? Big shot, Chauncey gonna take that shot. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? He's gonna do, he's that dude. You know what I'm saying? But you didn't have to worry about that because everybody was doing their part. Everybody. And Rasheed Wallace and Ben Wallace will do their part to make sure that Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, or Prince would get open to get that good look, to get that shot. They would make that sacrifice. They make that, they do that. And so that to me, again, I just think people really should just, again, look up and down at that roster and see and understand and appreciate, you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't get that often now in this day and age, especially with the way the CBA agreements are aligned and the way that the salary cap operates. You're not getting that a lot. You know what I'm saying? You got to set it up for success early, through what you do, draft and everything like that. These guys literally came together and said, we're going to put the Detroit Pistons back on the map as being, the beasts of the East. And they were for that period of time from 2002 to 2007. They were that team. And I give them their flowers for that.
For sure.
Thank
For
you,
just
Rip.
top tier team chemistry too, I would say.
Mm.
And I think now you mentioned this earlier when you referenced Steve Francis. Now, do you feel like Rip Hamilton is underrated or, in good standing among fans and peers? Where do you see him in that regard?
I think he's in good standing with fans. I think
Mm.
fans, the thing is that the fervor isn't as loud, right? Because nowadays now we more speak either up or up on the elites, or we speak completely down on the guys that are a bust because it's what generates clicks. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like it's easy, it's easy, to I want to say to throw dirt on the grave of a dude because his career bombed out, or he wasn't as successful as people thought he'd be. But don't take enough time maybe to look at some of the good moments in which they actually did. It gave us a reason for us to be able to kind of speak about them. Hopefully, that they would be in a space where people can appreciate the kind of game that they are, and if it can stay, has some sustainable longevity. But I never worried about that with Rip Hamilton, and I really think that Rip Hamilton um, is endeared by a lot of people simply because of the success that he helped manifest for the Detroit Pistons.
Mhm.
The problem is that while the Detroit Pistons, like Detroit is a large city, but really in basketball, it's small market. In this era right now that we're in, do you think that the Detroit Piston fan base, the Detroit Piston fandom, is better than or larger than the Golden State Warriors? You can make
Yeah.
the argument that Golden State Warriors right now are a larger market team than the Detroit Pistons. And yes, it's because the Detroit Pistons hasn't won, right? But you look at the economics, you look at the way things are. You can make to me, you can make the argument that while Detroit is a major metropolis as a market for basketball, it's not on the same tier as what your current state is right now with the NBA.
Right.
If you look at what Rip Hamilton did, Billups, that team, they made them a relevantly large market team for that time period. They became a large market team. They became the blueprint for what a lot of organizations wanted to do in order to yield sustainable success for the next 5 or 6 years, especially in a division like the Midwest, which at times can be marginalized because you got the Pacers, you got the Milwaukee Bucks. This basketball land, right? Like that whole Midwest area is
Yeah.
supposed to be where basketball is birthed, but it wasn't popping off like that. People still looking at Los Angeles. People still looking at the New York area. Yeah, you had the Chicago Bulls, but that's post Jordan. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? It's
Hmm.
like when Jordan decided to go to Washington, all of Chicago decided to go to Washington. You know what I'm saying? And nobody else gave a damn about what was going on in the Midwest. You know, but I think the success of what the Detroit Pistons is stabilized that, and now look at where we are. I I think it's what's funny is that he just doesn't get the kind of noise that I think a lot of people, because he wasn't that kind of superstar basketball player.
Hmm.
But if you look at his numbers, you look at what he successfully has done, you would think that this guy should be getting a lot of you know what I'm saying? Applause. Should be getting a lot of, you know, but it to me it's like he was a great player. Just doesn't he isn't star friendly. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't star friendly to people. And think about the era in which he played. There was a lot of stars.
Yeah.
There were a lot of dudes that had, you know, the it factor that made them more relevant than Rip Hamilton. But you could probably, you know, put his numbers up next to theirs. You can see he was hanging around right around with those big boys.
Yeah. I think that shows too, because if you even look at his I'm looking at his like his resume now, and it's funny that they win the championship and then what they lose in the finals right after that. And then the season after that is when he finally gets an all-star appearance. So if you
Mhm.
think about that little window, it's that third year where he finally gets that all-star love, which obviously you could
And you
attribute
think
to.
about it, he was playing in an era where that two guard position, you know, was pretty fierce, man. The
Yeah,
two guard
that's
was a
true.
very important position at that time. You know, Ray Allen and those guys, they're still playing, you know. Um, and remember too, the voting was definitely different.
Oh yeah.
I think that if it was amongst his peers, he would have been an all-star 2 years earlier.
Mm,
But
mm.
the way that they set up the voting, because he's not as popular a player to the fans. And look, let's keep it 100. Rip Hamilton's game bored people. Okay, nobody wanted to see long distance running in NBA basketball. They weren't ready for that. Now that's the staple. Now they want to see
Very true.
little steps running around. You know what I'm saying? Like you're taking a driving course. You know what I'm saying? Going around the cones. They want to see all of that for 48 minutes. They weren't like that some 14 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Some 20 years ago. They weren't like that. Excuse me. Now, again, that's the staple. They want to see that the players are conditioned to be able to get to where they need to get to and to execute their shots the way they. Now, if Rip Hamilton is playing in this era of NBA basketball and you look at his shooting percentages, he may not be considered top tier of what the expectations are. But again, I say, look at the teams that he played on and what those teams emphasize. Did it require him to be shooting high 40%, 50 percentile, mid range, and 37 and 40% from the three? If that was what it took for him to be a successful two guard, I'm sure he would evolve to that. But that
Yeah,
wasn't what was expected of him. And again, I go back to the fact that he was one of the better defenders in the NBA during that time. And the calling card for the Detroit Pistons was their ability to play defense.
absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? They were
Absolutely.
one of the great defensive teams. I don't think people really enough take pride in understanding that. When you talk about how, oh, you know, it's great dudes can get their shots off, defense still wins championships, right? And so the Detroit Pistons were among those teams that maintained that standard, and Rip Hamilton was a big reason why.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny you even mentioned that too, because if you look at 2008, now Basketball Reference literally has a note there that says he was 13th in Defensive Player of the Year. Now, if you told me that Rip Hamilton was one of the top 15 defenders in the NBA, I'm not sure most people would think that off the top of their heads back then. And
Right.
obviously it was
And
a
I and, I,
different
and my
league.
apologies, my apologies. I said he won Defensive Player of the Year. I meant to say that yes, he was 13th in
Oh,
the runnings for Defensive Player of the Year earlier. My bad.
no, you all good. You all good. Yeah, I think that's to me that's one of the most interesting parts about his career for sure, especially again at the frame that he was. But
Mhm.
that just shows how crazy that defense was in that time period.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then he was also most improved player, you know, ninth in the running.
Hmm.
But the guy in his rookie season averaged 9 points, and then he went to 18.
Yeah,
You
kind of
know what I'm
reminds me of
saying?
C.J. McCollum a little
Yeah,
bit.
man. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, oh, can you give me some run, coach? I can show you let me show you what I can do. And then he doubles up on his points, you know, points per game. Like Rip Hamilton, the guy was a baller. The guy was a baller. And, you know, I appreciate, you know what I'm saying, him and what he was able to do, you know, during that time. Like literally during that time. There were he was asked and tasked to guard a position and to be able to execute. And again, this is during the era where the two guard position was very relevant in the early 2000s. You know, there was no such thing as a swing guard, you know, like you needed a legit shooting guard. And whether that guy was a guy trying to shoot the three or a guy that was basically, coming off screens or whatever the case may be, he was also guarding those same dudes that were primarily one of the, the primary scorers for the opposing team. He was guarding those guys. So
So now I know you mentioned that, obviously he wasn't a guy that was the most flashy. But is there a highlight that comes to mind at all as you're thinking about Rip Hamilton's career? It could be
uh,
college too, but I'm thinking more NBA.
um, not so much not so much like a particular instant.
Mhm.
I just think that he was one of like I would say that he was one of the smoothest coming off the screen with his, you know, off the curl. Let me say that to
Mhm.
screen off the curl
Mm.
to shoot the mid range. It was so effortless. It was flawless, and he did it quick. He did it quick. Like people really should YouTube and watch him when he comes off curls. Ridiculous. It's so narrow. It's almost like he's basically like he's hugging the shoulder of the screener and still finds space to get the mid range off once
Right.
that ball comes to him. He was so smooth, bro. So smooth. He had a sound, very sound technique. And it's because of that quick twitch in him that it made everything just flawless. Like when it was coming off that screen, it was like almost money. Don't give him 5 inches of separation. If he's got the five, it's a wrap. And so I just remember so many instances of him just basically abusing those defenses that would try to, push hard up against the screen, overplay him, you foul him. But when he
Mm.
gets the shot off, he gets it off so quick.
I think, it's something me and my brother were talking about the other day. We were talking about Ray Allen, and it was like him and Ray Allen are the two guys I immediately think of when it's like they had such such a focus on their target, and it was to a point where if you don't beat their feet, it's already too late. It's
Yes,
already too late. No matter how much space they get, as long as it is considered space, they're gonna like you said, it's gonna be money. And I think Rip Hamilton is definitely one of those guys, and definitely somebody like I said when I was a kid, like I admired that about him. I admired that about him because it was somebody I could see myself like, hey, if all else fails, I could be like him. I could do that. So I love the way, like you said, he attacked his craft and he mastered it. He mastered it. I love watching. I think there's like a YouTube video too, like the NBA did
mhm,
years ago, where he's like really breaking down how he gets around those screens and how Reggie Miller taught him how to, include the hand fighting a little bit to get some extra space. And I just love how he was a nerd in that regard too. He really mastered his position.
absolutely. If you go to YouTube, if you go on YouTube and you go to NBA.com, you just put Rip Hamilton, and they have like top 10 plays that he had with the Detroit Pistons. Um, it's some of this stuff is just ridiculous. Like again, just him as a player. Um, and again, listen, I appreciate you bringing me on to have an opportunity to what I'm saying, drop a you had to be there. I didn't want this one to be more about just about someone that I just love. I think what I wanted it to be is a shared understanding that there are players that were out there that maybe we didn't take enough time to be able to watch and truly appreciate. And it's
Mm.
only until now, years after, and watching certain moments or events that are going on. And I think a lot of that of what we saw from this NBA sorry, this NBA season, but also from the 2024 Paris Olympics and seeing what the men's basketball team did, what the women's basketball team did, reminds me a lot of like sometimes the best teams are not just the superstar players coming together. Sometimes it's the want of those superstar players sacrificing the name on their jersey, but bringing the best of the skills required to achieve the task at hand.
Mhm.
And that to me is I want people to really understand and appreciate that's what you saw in them winning the championship. Because I think people too loosely believe that because the guy is LeBron James or because the guy is Steph Curry or because the guy is Kevin Durant, you just go out there and you just wax everybody that's out there. That's not how the game of basketball is played. It's
Right.
easy because if you're the best player on there and there's nobody who knows how to play you, and that's all well and good. But after time, after a number of years, there will be somebody who is going to catch up to how you play your game. There's
Wink,
going to
wink.
be
Probably
a
that guy in
team.
France.
Yeah, there's going to be a team that is practicing to with the intent to say, if we see you on the court, this may be the only chance that we get, but we're going to make the most of that opportunity. We're going to defeat you. And so I just, again, this is why I'm harking back to seeing guys like Rip Hamilton, because I just don't think people really understand that, like, the success that some guys really get, it was never, you don't see it all over on the streaming platforms that we have access to. Maybe if he had access to those things, you know what I'm saying, he
Right.
would probably be a much more popular basketball player that people can grow to appreciate and learn to love in sectors and markets that he never had access to. But fortunately, the success that he did bring to the table allows us to appreciate him now, that even though he's not playing the game of basketball, you can look back and say, damn, I want more dudes like that on my roster, because dudes like that were successful, but they also sacrificed for us to win. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Chips, you know what I'm saying? And ultimately, again, he started getting his all-star nods. He got his, he got his flowers, he got his just due. But we don't get there until we see the work ethic, and we see the success that was translated from what he did from UConn all the way to what he did up until his final season with the Chicago Bulls. And even then, still, when he realized that his window of winning, of playing basketball, was winding down, he still was influential in helping that Chicago Bulls team, be relevant,
Yeah. I,
because
I remember
they
vividly
were,
when we traded for
yeah,
him and the
yeah,
impact that he had. It was like we knew it was a perfect fit. Like that's from losing Keith Bogans, a solid 3-and-D guy. Like this is the guy, the next best guy we could get.
right. And so it says something. It says something, especially for, the role he played, the position that he played, and what he did. Real good stuff.
Very well said. Very well said. Now, last few questions, Cal, before we get out of here. I mean, we talked. I think we kind of flirted with this a little bit, but is there a player in today's game that kind of reminds you of Rip Hamilton?
Is there a player in today's game that reminds me of Rip? Um,
I feel as though it's a little hard. It's this one's a little hard. I'll
it's
admit that.
it's it's a little difficult. Right now, are you talking about like frame, or are you talking about like?
Oh, it could be anything. I'm mainly going towards like their style of play. So like, guys, I'm trying to think of guys that come off screens a lot and things of that nature, but you could do frame for sure. You could do a combination of players.
I mean, a couple of guys that like kind of remind me of what I love seeing from what I saw from Rip. Tyrese Maxey comes to mind, but he plays the point guard position.
Mhm.
Um, but the way that he hustles, the way that he's conditioned, and he's operating in a different space in the modern NBA because of, look at you, he's just like physically, he went from like this scrawny kid. I think coming into this offseason, like, people paid attention to him. You check him out on the streaming platform, not streaming platforms, excuse me. You see him on Instagram or X or whatever the case may be. Oh, he's deezed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's gearing up, to be that kind of guy. And I love that. Um, maybe Devin Booker in a way.
I thought about that. It's the demeanor,
The
right?
demeanor,
Yeah.
the mindset. I mean, a lot of people don't like Devin.
Right.
Nobody really had a problem with Rip, but they hated him enough because he was doing too much running around. But Devin, to me, I don't think people really appreciate his dexterity and his stamina. Like, he's that kind of guy where he can go a full 48, no question. He's methodical too. That's one thing, and I didn't mention this throughout the time that we've been talking about this, but he's methodical, and Rip was methodical. He was very deliberate in his approach and the way that he was going to get open. Devin Booker is exactly the same kind of way.
I
He
can
is
see that.
deliberate and very methodical in his approach on how he wants to attack the basket, where he goes to get into his spots. You don't see that as often now because he's playing next to Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. But in the beginning, when it was just Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, people should check the tape. Very similar to what you see in that approach and mentality of what I saw with Rip Hamilton.
That's a good comp for sure. I could definitely see it. And like I think even I mentioned CJ McCollum earlier, and
He
I
just,
think more so in the precision of like his mid-range game. I know
yeah,
CJ had a lot more freedom to handle that rock.
yeah,
And I think even in recently he came out. I don't know if you saw this. He was talking about somebody asked him about like a typical NBA offseason workout, and he was saying like, yo, like if I shoot 60% in an entire day from a workout, like that's a bad day for me. And just
mhm,
hearing him talk about what he goes through and why how much that percentage matters to him, and how he always tries to get that upper echelon because he wants to be one of the and is one of the most consistent guys in the league. Like similarly to Rip, right? Makes a big jump when he finally gets some playing time, and since that jump has always been around 20 points a game. So
mhm.
I see it in that regard as well.
Yeah, and the one thing I was going to say too, Devin Booker, like I don't want people to think that I'm comparing Devin Booker's scoring ability to Rip. Devin
Right.
Booker is a much better scorer than Rip Hamilton will ever be. But let's remember as well too, Rip Hamilton and what he did and how his game was catered or tailored wasn't the way that Devin Booker's was. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Um, Devin Booker came in as a scorer, and he had more range than Rip Hamilton. But remember, when Rip Hamilton was playing for the University of Connecticut, his role as a two guard and how he scored was very different than what we saw from Devin. But I'm
Mhm.
just speaking about the way Devin goes about scoring and the deliberateness is, him being deliberate and judicious in his ability to go about scoring the basketball. That kind of ethic, that kind of mentality, very similar to Rip Hamilton.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree. All right, now you have the opportunity to put Rip Hamilton in the modern NBA with four current players that would realistically fit with his style of play. Okay, just like I told Jabari Davis, if you want to go ignore salary cap, that's totally cool. I'm just thinking more on court. If you could put
Mhm.
him with four other guys of this current NBA, who would those teammates be?
Um, definitely, I definitely would put him next to LeBron James.
Mm,
Um, I would put him next to, let's see, LeBron will play the forward, Rip will play the two. Um, I would love to see him with Jalen Brown.
mm.
Um, I think there's a lot of flexibility and versatility on with that kind of that kind of lineup. Um, Rip needs a true point guard. Um,
That's where my mind was going to.
he needs a true ball distributor. Because I would have probably liked to see him with Steph, but I'm not. He's a great guard. He's a great guard for the team and system that he plays with. Doesn't necessarily mean that he knows what he's doing with the basketball at times. Maybe he does. He's just arrogant with it. Um, man. Legit. Oh, I know one. I would be very interested to see Jalen Brunson. So Jalen
He popped
Brunson,
up. It wasn't the one I'm gonna go with, but he did pop up in my
yeah,
head.
Jalen Brunson. That's a small front backcourt by all means, but damn, that would be a pretty nice one, and there'd be a lot of movement going on. You ain't gonna stop. You ain't gonna stop that kind of motion. So what am I missing? I'm missing a center.
Mhm. You
Okay,
got
I'll play your Huckleberry. I'll put Victor Wembanyama in there.
hmm. Mm,
I'll put Vic.
okay.
Now it doesn't mean that I wouldn't put Anthony Davis or it doesn't mean that it wouldn't be interchangeable. But I would be very interested to see that kind of lineup because to have very to me, you would have two very successful players in Rip and LeBron James. And the rest of these guys, I think the upside, they will flourish. Um, like to the umpteenth degree,
Mhm.
offensively and defensively. So that would be kind of my, must see. I would love to see a like that, Rip play around those kind of guys and see what would come of it.
No, I like it. A lot of
I'm
there's some
coming from
strength in
left
there.
field with that one, man. You hit me with the okey doke, so I'm coming from left field with that one. I'm sure there are a bunch of other guys, and I know if people hear this, they're going to be like, "Oh, how the hell did you come up?" Hey,
No,
man,
I see it. It's a lot of strength around Rip and a lot of active
roll,
hands
roll,
on
roll with
defense.
my weirdness. Okay, just roll with my weirdness. Best thing I can tell you.
I dig it, Cal. I dig it. I think I would go. So two guys I thought for sure would be Tyus Jones.
Huh.
Again,
Yeah,
somebody
interesting.
somebody
I
that I know is gonna get him the ball.
Okay. I'm on the fence with that one only because he had such a down year. And his last couple of years have been somewhat down. But listen, the potential for him is there. You know what I'm saying? So I could definitely see that he is someone that can distribute and definitely get the basketball to Rip. I can definitely see that.
Yeah, but like you, that is small though. So I think I'll go Tyus, Rip, again, and trying not to use the players that I've used in past episodes. I think I haven't used Tatum yet. I probably throw Tatum in there just to have a go-to guy on the wing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I'm gonna go and it's gonna be weird to do this, but I think I'm gonna go Giannis and Jaren Jackson. Even though I
Mm-hmm.
think Jaren Jackson is a better four than he is five, that would be kind of something I feel like if my coach brain is there, I would like kind of play with that a little bit. But yeah, I would want somebody like Jaren Jackson to protect the paint. Obviously, Giannis can do that as well. But again, is somebody I can get the ball to in the half court too. So I think that would be
Uh,
mine.
I'm gonna throw this last thing out here.
Mhm.
Um, Would it not be a pretty awesome backcourt duo though to see John Morant and Rip Hamilton play?
Mm.
I mean, yeah, that's the all skinny team.
It is. It is.
That's the all.
I'm
That's the
I'm
all.
I'm
That's
with that
that's
though.
the that's the all lanky team. You know what I'm saying? But that would be quite the backcourt. You talk about, you know what I'm saying, gassing the other team's backcourt. Them two would gas them.
Ooh,
They
you're
would gas them.
right.
Like, yo, them cats
Track
would be
meet.
on empty within the first 2 minutes of the quarter.
That's facts. That's
Morant
facts.
is not. Morant is nonstop. Rip nonstop. Them cats have dudes like basically burning out the soles of their heels. You remember when Zion Williamson, you know what I'm saying, came out his shoes?
Mhm. Oh yeah, yeah.
Cats would be coming out their shoes trying to stay up with Morant and with Rip.
That's
Absolutely.
facts. That's facts. Ooh, that would be something. Uh, all right. You have to pick one hip hop song as the soundtrack for their play style or his career. However you see it. What song would that be and why?
Mm, hip hop song. Oh, I got one.
You got one?
Yeah,
I know I'm
Day,
struggling.
Daytona 500. Daytona 500. Um, Ghostface and Raekwon. Rip
My Ghost and
Hamilton.
Ray.
Yeah, Rip Hamilton on the basketball court. That should really be his theme music. That should, that track
Mm,
should be his theme music because that he's like NASCAR. He was always on the
mm.
go. He was constantly in motion. He's never still. That's what I love about Rip Hamilton. He was always moving. He made the cameraman tired of moving around for him. You know what I'm saying? That's he was always moving, always moving. So Daytona 500.
I knew you were gonna bring it. I knew you were gonna bring it. And see, even then, my mind immediately goes to especially with you saying that, my mind goes to running by the far side. But
Mm.
Yeah, I think because that's been in my brain recently. I won't lie. I feel like that's the one that I, as of right now, as at what 7:23 Central Time. That's probably what I'm gonna go with. I might think of something better, and I'll probably text you after,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Feel free
ah,
to
like.
feel free to play that in the background if you like, man. I'm all for that. You know what I'm saying? That's that
Uh,
awesome post that's that hip hop post editing.
for sure, for sure. And then, uh, I mean, I think you've done such a great job already, Cal. But just any final thoughts, or let me rephrase it. Instead of just final thoughts in general, what is one thing that you wish my generation specifically knew about Rip Hamilton?
I just, I don't want it to just be your generation,
Hmm,
but
that's
in
fair.
talking with your generation, if you want to really appreciate the flavor that your generation has, there's nothing wrong with looking at guys who aren't big name, because in our era, we had a lot of guys that I don't think really had a platform to be big name. But when you look at their statistics, when you go back and you look at their footage, and thank goodness we have all of these different devices and we have access to these archives, the NBA, YouTube TV. Like we were able to capture some of these moments because within us, the fandom within us loved what we saw, that whenever there was that opportunity to record and capture it and put it in the time capsule, now your generation has an opportunity to see what that was like. You're able to be able to draw those comparisons, but it's a realistic comparison because you have access to what we're saying. This is what we had, and now
Mhm.
this is what you've got. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the people that we're talking about right now, it's not like those guys coming up, growing up in the game, have not heard of who Rip Hamilton was, and what Rip Hamilton did. They
Mhm.
just don't blurt that out as the first person, but that doesn't mean that when they were at practices, when they were in the off season, you know what I'm saying? That
Good
they
point.
knew who that guy was and what that guy represented. And so that's the one thing I just want, more people of all generations to understand. You know what I mean? Like we can make comparisons of all kinds of players, and I do that a lot. We all do that.
Right.
But if you really want to appreciate the player, especially within the era that he played, you know, make sure you go back and you see what that player did. Don't just look at the numbers. Look at what that player did. You know, if there's footage there, watch what he did, you know, and then have that honest conversation with yourself about whether or not that guy was good, trash, whatever the case may be. I mean, your opinions, your opinions, but don't come from a place of just assuming that your player was the best player in the world when your player doesn't become that player until he saw a Rip Hamilton do what he was doing,
Very
achieve
true.
what he was achieving, winning the way he was winning. Like your player doesn't get to that point if he makes an admission saying, "Yeah, I actually was watching Rip Hamilton play." You see, it sounds sexier when I say, "Yeah, I was actually watching Carmelo Anthony when he played." Yeah, when it was Dwayne Wade when he played, because those guys have won multiple championships. Those guys, they're dating, superstar, actresses and things of that nature. They're doing exactly what the NBA, and the glamour of everything, the glamour and the glitz affords you. But there were guys out there that was doing it just as equally as well, just didn't have the same platform. But you measure
Right.
up the numbers, and there you go.
Yeah, and I like what you kind of alluded to there of just kind of like it naturally bridges both generations together in that ways. And I think that's the beautiful part of it. And even thinking of like, because even something I like to do now is like I don't even there are guys like if I feel like watching highlights from like my childhood, I want to try to like find full games. I don't even watch like highlights anymore. I try to find full
Full
games, even if
games.
it's in, you know, 280p or whatever. Like I'm gonna watch that thing and see what they did for a full 48 minutes. That's something I like to do. So I think that's dope that you mentioned that.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
All right, last question, Cal. This is probably the biggest one of them all. You know, real ones know what time it is every time I have a guest on here, especially you making your debut. I need your 5 by 5. All right, because this
Mm.
is hip to the games. I need you to share 5 of your favorite basketball players and your 5 favorite rappers all time.
Five favorite basketball players. Um, Larry Bird.
Mm, let's go.
Hakeem Elijah one.
Mm,
Um, Sean Kemp.
nice.
What is that? Three.
Yep.
Kevin Garnett.
Mm, that's a mean
And
five, quite literally.
yeah, yeah. And God rest his soul, Reggie Lewis,
Mm,
who died well before his time.
yeah.
All right, five. What did you say? Five favorite rappers.
Yes, sir.
All right. CL Smooth.
Nice.
Um, Most Def. Black Thought.
Mm.
Um, Man, this is tough. I'm typically more group, you know what I'm saying, rap
Mm,
groups.
mm.
Um
You can if you want to. I know.
no,
My
no, 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 no.
okay.
I'm just, we'll save that for another time because we'll be here another 2 hours. All right. So who did I say again? I said CL Smooth. I said Most Def, and I said Black Thought.
Yep.
Method Man,
Mm.
and this is tough. I hate to do this. I know it's only five, but I'm gonna I'm gonna I have to put them in
I was
as
gonna say,
part of
give us
that
a
that
six man.
five.
Give us a six man.
Yeah, right. Six man coming off the bench. It's gonna be Common and Redman.
Nice. Ooh, that's nasty. That's nasty.
Mm.
And I could tell you did good, Cal. I could tell you were
Yeah,
going through. I
I
feel
was,
like you had
listen.
your list, and then you just had to pick
It's a
who makes
struggle.
that.
It's a struggle, bro. It's a struggle. And let me say this one thing because I want people to understand this too. I love hip hop to death, right? Like I grew up on hip hop, and I apologize that I don't have someone from the West Coast because I should have someone from the West Coast. Um, but there were so many really awesome rappers in that time that I grew up in. Exhibit, um, Rascass, uh, and I had an affinity in the late, when Royce the 5'9", Eminem can
Mhm.
come to mind as well too. But you're asking me like right off the bat who my five was, and that's obviously I had that six, but those are the guys that I come in with first. But be rest assured, I got a hot, you know what I'm saying? I got a hot team coming off the bench. If anybody gets injured, I got my dudes ready to come in. You know what I'm saying? The replacement killers. You know what I
For
mean? So
sure. For
yeah,
sure. For sure. Cal, thank you so much for your time and bringing your passionate fandom to Hip to the Games, reminding us all why we had to be there to see Rip Hamilton. It's greatly appreciated. Myself and our listener here would definitely love to have you back again, going for probably Antonio McDyess and then hearing the rest of that 5x5. But
yeah, man,
before you
absolutely.
go, can you please let our listener here know how they can support you, follow you, keep up with all you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So much love to the 19 Media Group family.
Yep.
Much love to my boy Des and H2DG family. Thank you for those who have been listening and tuning in. And if you like what you heard or you're interested on how profoundly weird my train of thought is, you can catch myself and my co-host, my partner in crime, my man Warren Shaw. We do the Baseline NBA podcast, available on all the major platforms, especially through 19 Media Group as well too. You can also catch us on YouTube. If you want to check out our shows, it's a weekly show covering the NBA, the culture of basketball. And you can go to the www.thebaselinenba.com. That's our landing page, so you can check out our most recent episode, especially the one where we have discussing, they reminisce segment with Steve Francis and such. I know we'll be building up another show shortly on things that are happening in the association and getting ourselves geared up for this upcoming NBA season as well too. So we're looking forward to, if you're a new listener and you needed something to latch on to get into that, by all means, hop on board with the family. Trust, we're gonna give you what we say is the butter goods, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And there you have it. There's another episode of Hip to the Games in the books, all for the love of the best combo there is. Shout out again to Cal Lee for joining the show and showing love to Rip Hamilton, definitely one of the best shooting guards of his era. And that's it. That's a wrap for H2DG. Peace out and God bless. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Hip to the Games, and if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit up the socials at Desmond Powell _ and at Hip to the Games on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok so you don't miss out on the fun. And please follow or subscribe to the show and leave a review on the podcast platform you're on right now, as your support is greatly appreciated.